Inside Business, in association with GlobalEye.
For many expat professionals and entrepreneurs, Dubai had seemed at first to be a refuge, relatively insulated from the panic that began hitting the rest of the world last autumn. Cushioned by vast oil and gas wealth, the UAE has been viewed as an insulated haven. But now, of course, this view is changing and we're rapidly going into uncharted waters. Is the situation really, though, as bad as the hype that built Dubai is now working against the city, which as little as 6 months ago was described as the world's fastest growing city? With us on Inside Business, we welcome back Tim Searle, who is CEO of GlobalEye. Thanks a lot for coming in, Tim.
Glad.
Now, I mean, does it help to be positive during these rather difficult times?
It does help to be positive, but of course we must keep our feet on the ground, because I think this positive attitude, which was probably amplified far too much in Dubai, certainly in the years leading up to where we are today, that there was almost this one-way bet mentality that people just couldn't see there was a downside. They were not going to consider that the free economy, the dynamics of supply and demand, and hence, I think people got themselves, perhaps overstretched themselves in situations where now they find it quite painful. But I think if we don't have a positive attitude, if we always stay in the doldrums, then it's not going to help the sentiment overall, whether we're looking at the Dubai situation or a worldwide situation, because the market's all about sentiment.
Many people have taken out loans in the UAE, and 1 year ago, if you want to take out a loan, it's very easy, and there was this idea that Dubai and the UAE in general is insulated with all that wealth from oil, the petrodollars. So now, what about people who have lost their job? They're going to have problems repaying those loans. What would you say to them?
I think you're absolutely right, and you're probably also correct in saying that a year or two ago you were probably given a loan whether you wanted one or not, because of course remember banks make money by lending money to people. Unfortunately now, because the liquidity has actually dried up significantly, loans are very difficult to obtain. If you've now got into a situation where you've lost your employment and you're finding it difficult to repay your loans, you must go to your lender as soon as possible and tell them what the situation is. Go to your creditors, to your service providers, and just say this is the situation, and face it head on. Don't let it sort of fester away, because it'll only get worse. Face it head on and come to some sort of strategy with that lender to come to some sort of solution.
Well, that leads us on to an email we've received from Ziad, who's in Kuwait. Ziad asks, what happens to companies who have a cash flow problem? What are their options currently?
Well, I think on that side of stuff, you basically have to go back to your creditors, you have to go back to your service providers. You've got to tell them what your situation is. You've got to tell them that you've got yourselves into difficulties and show them that. And then basically you get a strategy with that lender or that creditor or service provider, etc. And once you've got that strategy again, try and stick to it. They'll generally run with that, because you've got to remember that they don't want to foreclose or default on that loan. They want to keep receiving the interest payments, because that's how banks make money.
All right, we've got Geeta on the line. She is in Sharjah. Geeta, you're through to City 7 TV, and what's your question for Tim?
Hi, I paid 4 checks totaling 85,000 dirhams in an apartment. That was 3 months ago. I'm being made redundant now. Is there anything I can do to dissolve the contract?
Geeta, you need to go straight back to your landlord and ask if there's a possibility to dissolve that contract. You might be given a flat no, but you could also be given a flat yes, or maybe even a joyful yes. Because you've got to remember that I don't know how long you've been in your property, but of course, with the way that rates have increased recently, because you're breaking contract, there may be an opportunity for the landlord to re-rent that property at a higher price. So without knowing Geeta's actual details of her property, it either could be a flat no, or it could be that the fact that you'll open arms will say, yes, please, let's dissolve this because I can re-rent the property in line with the RERA new regulations to another tenant. But once again, go back to the landlord, speak to them about your situation, be open and honest about it, and you can get a solution.
Now, Tim, I mean, for people who have lost their job or for whatever reason they're having to leave the Emirates, what should they be thinking about at this time?
Well, certainly from a financial perspective, they need to know what they're going to do with their money. Clearly, they may have to clear outstanding liabilities they have here. If they're going back to Europe, for example, there's tax implications they need to consider. There is pension considerations they need to consider. I think traditionally a lot of people, when they'd worked overseas, put their money in an offshore bank account and then went home to Europe somewhere and thought they'd keep it safe offshore and no one would ever find out about it. The rules have changed quite significantly, and that's not possible to do. There is a solution requiring sort of offshore structuring, etc., but those kind of areas need to be looked at once again as soon as possible because, as I say, there are tax implications regarding savings, pensions, all that kind of stuff, which expatriates should look at sooner rather than later.
A lot of people have said now that they don't really know who to trust, really. I mean, there's so many opinions coming from so many people. Where can people, get good advice?
It's a tough one, absolutely right, because here we are 18 months later and Lehman Brothers aren't with us, whereas 18 months ago you had one of the largest private banks, around for 200 years, $3 trillion under assets. They're not here anymore. So it's a very difficult world that we're in. We're pretty much in uncharted waters. What we certainly do here at GlobalEye is we analyse, hopefully, the downside. We do a lot of risk management, sit with our clients to find out what they're trying to do, and then come up with potential solutions based on that. We can only work on what the information we have today, but I think there is, as I say, some uncharted waters that we're going into, and so we always try to maintain that we're dealing with the largest institutions, but as I said in the example, Lehman Brothers aren't here, so we just have to make sure that we hope for the best.
Tim Searle, once again, many thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Great to see you again. Thank you. Well, there we are. That's it for this edition of Inside Business. You can contact the programme by writing to us at ib@city7tv.com. For now, from all of us on this edition of the programme, goodbye and have a good weekend.
Inside Business, in association with GlobalEye.